Hey, Bob here again. It's Thursday, the 27th of August, 2026. And I just made a video of me doing some sanding of the cedar top. And there were a few things I wanted to talk about that I sort of forgot about in that other video. So I decided that while I share these few little things, I would do a little sanding of this top. Now, yesterday I was working on this, and I'm looking around carefully. Came out great. I'm very happy with it. I've already sanded the edges with the hard block. And I also, if you watched that video that I made yesterday, I think, I did some sanding with the double-sided 220 and the glove, okay? And I wanted just to, I'm going to do a little sanding before I take this out of the form, and I'm going to scrape these bindings flush in about 15 minutes. Thought I'd just do a little more sanding here, getting rid of a little more of the shellac here. But what I wanted to talk about was finish while I'm doing this. And finish has a really big effect on the sound of your guitar. So, if you string up a guitar in the raw that hasn't been finished, like Jose Romanellos used to do quite a lot, if you string up a guitar with no finish on it, and then you finish it with either varnish, lacquer, or shellac, or a combination of those finishes, or even a urethane, a AB urethane finish like Robert Ruck used to use. Whatever. As soon as you put a finish on a guitar, the sound of your guitar is going to change. So from in the white to putting a finish on, the sound of your guitar is going to change. What's going to happen? Well, it's been my experience that finish completes the sound of the guitar. Finish will dampen some of the overtones. Finish it can work in your favor, but if you put too much on, it's going to work against you. And a lot of people think that putting lacquer on, which is sort of like a brittle eggshell, some people think that, putting on a finish like lacquer or varnish is too heavy of a finish versus French polish. And the important thing about finish, don't forget, when you put on varnish or lacquer, especially varnish, you're sanding in between coats. You want to get any dust off that stuck in the varnish or lacquer. You want to get that off before you do the next coat. And you also want to flatten it out and sort of level that finish as you put sequential coats on. So, what I've found about finish is that it does affect the sound, and I've made some varnished guitars that sounded incredible. And I can say that because they came back years later for a repair or, something, an adjustment, whatever. And I was always amazed at how good they sounded years later. I had forgotten, and I often thought that a good varnished guitar controlled the overtones, so you didn't get any crazy high overtones that were out of whack. We all like overtones, but when you have overtones that aren't controlled, it's really not good. And I found that if I'm going to French polish a guitar, doing it just a little bit of French polish versus doing a full 3 months of French polishing, let's say, it seems that almost the more French polish you put on, the better the guitar sounds. Keep in mind, French polish is ultra thin finish. It's put on with a pad under pressure, and most of what you put on, being alcohol, there's a lot of evaporation, just like with lacquer. Varnish is different. When you put varnish on, it does gas off, but it's thicker usually, unless you thin it down a lot. So, anyway, when I French polish, I can get a guitar looking pretty good in about 2 weeks, working on a guitar every other day or every day, polishing it. My French polish sessions are usually about 3/4 of an hour. And imagine if I were, what my schedule is if I'm doing the tops, how would I say this? Let's put it this way. One day I would French polish the tops on all of the guitars. And then the next day, I wouldn't touch the top. I would do the back, sides, neck, and head, okay? So I was like on and off. Every other day I'd do the tops. Every other day I'd do the back, sides, neck, and head. And that was my schedule. And I would plot it all. Every single session, I would write it down in a notebook just so that I didn't forget. Because sometimes you get interrupted and then you go back and you think, did I polish that yesterday? You forget. So, for a Desmond guitar, a minimum of 3 months of polishing or applying shellac in the French polish method. What I love about shellac is I don't have to sand in between coats. I do it very sterilely and very cleanly, and I try not to get dust. I'm very anal about that. Whereas when I do varnish, I sand in between every coat and I get covered with white dust, and it's not good to breathe. I have to wear a mask, and you have to sand in between coats and then brush on the next coat. And there's an art to varnishing as well. But I got to the point where I didn't like the fumes any longer. Hold on 1 second. Okay, I thought I had a can of number 38 here, but when we were going to move last year, I must have thrown it out because it was getting old. I prefer French polishing because it's a additive process. You keep adding it, you don't take it off. The only time you really need to wet sand it or sand it at all is when you're getting toward the end and you want to flatten it out and get rid of any lines left from the pad. It's also a good idea not to put it on too wet, and it does take years of learning it how to do it properly and develop your own technique. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is the finish affects the sound in a big way. A French polished guitar sounds different than a varnished guitar. I've never done lacquer, so I can't comment on that. But I have steel string guitars that are lacquered. They sound great. I'm just saying there is a difference in sound between a French polished guitar and a varnished guitar. A varnished guitar, honestly, I think they sound better. But it's a dusty process, and it's not a safe process because the varnish is a carcinogen. And not that you're going to drink it or anything, but just being around the stuff, I don't think it's real healthy. So I switched it over to French polish many, many years ago. And I just wanted to chat about that for a brief moment. The other thing I want to talk about is, and I'll keep this real brief, we all have opinions. And as I was mentioning, watching a video this morning of a guitar maker who has lots of opinions, he may believe that his way is the best way to do things. And I almost have to laugh sometimes because we're all different. We all have different ways of doing things. And there are clearly wrong ways to do things, but good guitar makers, the best of them, they might have a different way of doing something than I do, and we're both still good guitar makers. So I like to keep my opinions, I like to share them, but I also like to say that, I could be wrong. I've developed my beliefs over a period of 33 years now, but I honestly don't know everything. And I'm learning all the time. Now at age 71, in order for me to learn even more, I would have to continue doing this for another, probably till the end of my life, and I'm not willing to do that. I don't want to die at my workbench. It's just not that important in the big scheme of things. I love guitar making, I really do, but it isn't everything. So, the point here is we all have opinions, and I'm sharing what I do. You might not do it this way, and that's okay. But I decided before I croaked that I wanted to share what I've learned. And remember years ago, Tim Olson from the Guild of American Luthiers, he wanted me to do at his convention, he wanted me to do a session, a teaching session or whatever. And I told him no. And the reason I told him no was I wasn't ready yet to do one. I didn't know enough yet. Now, here I am, 34 years into doing this kind of stuff. Some years I did more than others. But I do feel like I know a certain amount now, but I clearly don't know everything. And to compound that, we guitar makers, classical guitar makers, generally there are three types of guitars. There are sort of traditional guitars, like this one, and then there are double top guitars, like Gernot Wagner and Matthias Daman and oh my gosh, so many others. I can't think of them all now. And even Dake Traphagen is making, double top guitars now. Ramirez is making some partial double top guitars. So there are different kinds of guitars, and it's not like guitars, you can't compare them anymore because the different styles of guitars sound different. Hold on a second. So, the two things on this little video, other than sanding this top a little more and getting some more of the shellac off, just to wrap this video up quickly, varnish. When I used to varnish, I would put on about 10 or 11 coats. Sounds like a lot, but don't forget, most of it gets sanded off in between coats. And what you're doing with the varnish is you're filling any voids, grain, whatever. And it's a relatively, I can do a whole guitar in about a month, and it comes out looking beautiful. And there's some drying time involved, especially the last coats, but beautiful sounding guitars. Manuel Velasquez, his guitars sound great, and one of the reasons is the varnish. Paul Fisher from England, he used varnish. There's a guitar maker in Italy, I can't pronounce his name, but his first and last name both begin with L. He varnishes. And I'm sure there's many, many other people. Varnish makes a beautiful sounding guitar. French polish does too. French polish guitars are a little more open and a little more overtony. They're not, I think the varnish controls the sound better than French polish. But I continue to French polish because I just have gotten used to the process. I like it. So that's one thing. The finish you put on becomes a big part of your sound. And when you build a guitar, you almost have to consider what finish you're putting on when you're thinning your top, sides, back. You have to remember that if you're going to varnish, varnish is going to control the sound more than French polish. So you might want to make slightly thinner plates, tops and so on. And the other thing is, the other subject was watching the video of a guitar maker this morning with strong opinions, and the longer I do this, me personally, the longer I do this, the less I know. Okay, I'm not a braggadocious kind of guy. I do have some strong opinions on soundboard thicknesses and things like that, but I've made thin top guitars that sound wonderful. I've made thick top guitars that sound wonderful. There's many ways to make a guitar. There isn't one way. I look at guitars like beautiful women. They're all beautiful, but they're all different from each other. So that's the end of this little session. I'm going to take this out of the form now and scrape the sides of the bindings and get them flush with the sides of the guitar. And I'm going to do both of the guitars today. I'm going to do that to both of them. Both of the two guitars that I'm making, the cedar one and this one, they're at the same stage right now. They're exactly at the same stage. So I want to scrape the bindings flush, and then I want to round them over. I want to round this edge over. And I don't do it a little bit, I do it quite a lot. I like a nice rounded feel there. That's it, bob out. Finish is really important. and it's part of the building process. It's not just something you throw on at the end. It has it definitely plays a role in the sound of the final sound of a guitar. And also how long the finish has aged also has a lot to do with how wet or dry the sound of the guitar will be. Okay? So take it for what it's worth. I remember Alfredo Velasquez telling me one time that the varnish was part of their sound. It wasn't just the guitar, it was the varnish. And I also wanted to say that Manuel used to use Pratt & Lambert number 38 gloss when I met him. However, before that, he used Mohawk. I think it was called Rock Hard Varnish or Tabletop Varnish, something like that, made by Behlen, Behlen. And he used that for many years, and then he switched over to the Pratt & Lambert. He thought the Pratt & Lambert was a little, it was a little less hard. How would I put this? It wasn't as restricting as the Mohawk varnish. But remember, most of the varnish gets sanded off. What you're trying to get is at the end, you're trying to get a very thin finish that you can bring up to a high gloss. Okay? So that is a little bit about varnish and French polish. And they both have their pluses and minuses. Varnish is a much more durable finish than French polish. But if you take care of your guitar, and if you don't expect that the French polish is going to stay perfect forever, I think in the end French polish wins. And it's been used for, centuries. So anyway, bob out and have a good day.